to check on her family. Why is that? Does that make any sense? Everyone would sprint inside the house to make sure that there's no one in there that was hurt or injured or, God forbid, dead. Everyone would do that. But not Jennifer McCabe. The only way that makes sense is if Jennifer McCabe already knew that Brian and Nicole were just fine. That's the only reasonable explanation. And the only way she would know that they were fine is if she knew what happened. But Michael Proctor never explored this incredibly suspicious behavior. Don't you have questions? This would give anyone reasonable doubt. And don't you have questions also about Brian Higgins? Michael Proctor certainly didn't. Higgins had been sending flirtatious and romantic texts to John's girlfriend, Karen Reed. You'll remember I asked Sergeant Buchanan a simple question. Were those texts flirtatious in nature? He refused to answer that simple question. Do you remember that?
I remember.
Quote, I'm not comfortable putting a label on that, end quote. We read the texts. It's not a secret. Of course they were flirtatious. Of course they were romantic in nature. The reason he refused to answer that simple question is telling. It's because these flirtatious texts establish a motive for Brian Higgins. Sergeant Buchanan could not bring himself to tell the truth. His bias was on full display. He was covering for another cop. Investigators also ignored Higgins' suspicious late-night visit to the Canton Police Department. That was after a night of drinking, by the way. Why didn't they investigate this? What was so important that Higgins needed to go to the police station at that time, 1:30 in the morning, while drunk, by the way? Why weren't they interested in those facts? Remember, he's an ATF agent. He's a cop, a member of the Blue Wall, and best friends with Brian Albert. He would know that the CPD would be the first to get the call when someone reported John missing or injured. He would know what to look for, what to listen for, to determine if a report had been made and when and what the response was going to be. You saw the skulking through the hallways with his hood up, moving bags between cars, and of course, that late night mysterious phone call on his cell phone, a phone that you don't have and that you'll never see. All of that, and Michael Proctor never gave him a second look. All of that, and the Commonwealth, who's supposed to be after the truth, didn't call him to the stand. If you have any unanswered questions about Brian Higgins, that's reasonable doubt. The police didn't interview Brian Higgins on January 29th, 2022, but he was at the police station, as we've just seen. You heard evidence that Higgins and Chief of Police Kenny Berkowitz, also good friends, were in the Sallyport together with the SUV for a, quote, wildly long time. Kelly Dever, another Boston cop, told you that. She also told law enforcement agents that she found it, quote, weird that Higgins could have access to that very sensitive evidence, the SUV. Folks, there is never a situation in which a witness, a potential suspect even, should be given access to the evidence in a case.
Amen.
But that's exactly what happened here. Higgins was given unfettered access to that SUV and its taillight nearly immediately, according to Kelly Dever's statement to law enforcement. And it was at that exact time, the exact moment that Higgins would be in that Sallyport, that the 42 minutes of the Sallyport video is just missing. It's just gone, vanished. Well, that's convenient. Now put in context the condition of that taillight when it was actually seized in Dighton. It was cracked, but not completely damaged. I ask you to compare and contrast Officer Kelly Dever, her attitude, her demeanor. That's all for you to judge. Her attitude, her demeanor, her truthfulness, her motives from the witness stand. Compare and contrast that to Sergeant Nick Barrows. Who's more believable? Officer Barrows is unattached to any of the players in this grand play directed by Michael Proctor. was truly independent. And what did he tell you? Was the taillight, he was asked, was the taillight in this condition when Michael Proctor picked up that SUV at 412? His answer? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was cracked, but not completely damaged, not smashed out like that. So how did the taillight get cracked? How did it end up in the condition where it was cracked, as Officer Barrows saw it, but not completely damaged? Well, you don't have to guess. There's a video. Just watch.
Brilliant. This is brilliant. He's done great so far.
That's
I'm
how
very
it got
impressed.
cracked. And Judson Welcher's own recreation confirms it. Look at the contact.
Yep.
That's from the Commonwealth's expert. And that further is confirmed by the fact that there were no taillight pieces found in any of the initial searches conducted at the scene. 2 searches, 50-foot area searched. Not a single fragment was found until after Michael Proctor had access to and control of that SUV and its taillight. What does that say about the character and quality of this case?
What does
It's
it say?
revealing what happened here at trial. One of the most dramatic moments probably of the trial, Kelly Dever. How can you trust this investigation when you saw how far a police officer will go? You had a front row seat to the power of police manipulation and police corruption. Front row seat. Kelly Dever was interviewed by a separate law enforcement agency, not a friendly department, not Boston Police Department, not Michael Proctor's MSP, a different independent agency. She told those law enforcement agents in a formal interview that she saw Brian Higgins and Chief Kenneth Berkowitz alone in the Sallyport with the SUV. She was detailed, she was clear, she was unequivocal, she remembered the specifics, she recalled how it made her feel, quote, weird. She recalled that how long Higgins spent, a quote, wildly long time, as she described. These are all incredible details to tell law enforcement. She couldn't have been clearer, she couldn't have been more specific. But then she's put on a witness list and she's subpoenaed by the defense. Oh boy. Then this rookie cop was called up to the police commissioner's office. The same commissioner that was the boss of Brian Albert. They have a meeting, a private meeting, and he says, wink, wink, nod, nod, we support you, Officer Dever. What else was said in that meeting? What else is reasonable to believe was said in that meeting? She claimed she couldn't remember. She claimed not to remember if he instructed her to do the right thing. But the commissioner of the Boston Police Department certainly said something to this rookie cop, and all of a sudden, that detailed, unambiguous, unequivocal statement to law enforcement became, what did she say? A false memory.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Not I
false
didn't
memory.
say it. She admitted she said it. She admitted she detailed the entire story. She just said, it's a false memory. What? So she's called to the commissioner's office to make sure that she would do the right thing. That's why she was called. And now we know what that means. In her words, my entire career depends on what I say here on the stand. I'll
Boom.
quote that again. Quote, my entire career depends on what I say here on the stand. You bet it does.
Oh, she's getting fired.
That's how it works. And that's how we got her.
The looking.
At the end of the
y'all?
day, you have to ask yourself, can you trust the Commonwealth's case? Can you trust their witnesses? Can you trust their evidence? And here are a few of the highlights. A video that was played in a courtroom and sold as accurate. Turns out it was completely inverted, flipped backward, completely false. The test that formed the basis of their entire theory of the case. Watch closely as Dr. Welcher stands as a surrogate.
Like he moved.
Is that a righteous test? Or is that a manipulation? Dr. Welcher tried to deceive and fool you by leaning into the car, manipulating the results of his own test. When the truth was revealed by Dr. Rentschler, the Commonwealth spent the next hour cross-examining it about how that test was meaningless. It actually didn't mean anything. Well, that's convenient now that we realize that it was a manipulated test, and it actually does mean nothing. It didn't represent the theory of the Commonwealth's case. That's what was suggested. That test does not represent the theory of the Commonwealth's case. Really? Then why was Dr. Welcher playing dress-up in John O'Keefe's clothes, or identical clothes to John O'Keefe, when he was holding a glass? Why was he holding the glass right behind the vehicle? And why was he standing with his right arm oriented to the right rear taillight if he wasn't trying to recreate the circumstance that is the Commonwealth's entire theory? The Commonwealth stood up here with a straight face and told you they weren't trying to suggest that that's how John was hit by the car. Of course they were trying to suggest that's their theory of the case.
Duh.
They only abandoned it 2 days ago when it was revealed by our experts that it's physically impossible. That silent witness, that science, that physics,
Damn
has become very
science.
pesky to the Commonwealth because there was no collision. Dr. Welcher also told you under oath that there were no x-rays taken of John's arm. He tried to deceive you into believing that John's arm might have been broken. I don't know. I didn't see any x-rays, so I can't tell you what the damage was inside the arm. Really? The Commonwealth has had those x-rays in their possession for 3 years. And again, it took the defense to bring out the truth. The x-rays do not fit the Commonwealth's theory, so you weren't shown. And Dr. Welcher wasn't going to admit it. And my goodness, then we get to the sweatshirt. That was a moment.
That was
Mr.
a
Brennan
moment.
stood here in front of you and dramatically held up John's sweatshirt. Not just to the witness, but to you. And asked Dr. Wolf about it multiple times. Specifically, while it was in that plexiglass, asked Dr. Wolf about the multiple holes in the back of the sweatshirt. He interrupted Dr. Wolf, and Dr. Wolf started to look at the sweatshirt and say, well, and he said, how about here? Here's a hole, here's a hole, here's a hole, here's a hole. Dramatically tapping on that plexiglass. It was clear what the suggestion was, that the holes in the back of John's sweatshirt were from January 29th. That's the impression that was expected to be left with you. That's the impression that he wanted to leave with you. And that's false. The truth is, the Commonwealth created those holes. They aren't holes from road rash. They weren't made on January 29th. Those are cuttings from the Commonwealth's own crime lab, folks. That's what those holes are. And even with 3 prosecutors, all 3 of them, sitting right there in the room at the time, it had to be the defense to correct that record, to bring out the truth. If we hadn't done that, what impression would you folks have been left with? It's more than negligence. That's dangerous. It's dangerous. I'm going to guess that Mr. Brennan's not going to say much about this, about the fraud that was attempted on you. If he doesn't, that speaks louder than any concocted excuse the Commonwealth might come up with. It's shameful. It's shameful. We are after the truth in this courtroom. You're entitled to it. Demand it. Why would the Commonwealth stoop to a stunt like that?
Well,
it's desperation. They know what you now know, what their experts know. There was no collision. So now we've reached the final moments of the trial, and you've seen the facts and you've seen the evidence, and we've just talked about dozens and dozens and dozens of facts that are reasonable doubt. Each one of them are reasonable doubts. These facts, these note cards that you're looking at,
I love this presentation, how they did the little note
one
cards.
on top of another, literally stacks and stacks of them covering the table. as you mentally sift through those cards, realize that every one of them is a massive hole in the Commonwealth's case. Every single one of the note cards represents a hole in the Commonwealth's case. If you're holding mentally even one of those cards, you're holding reasonable doubt, folks. You're holding a not guilty verdict. Reasonable doubt is not a sliding scale. It's a wall. If the Commonwealth cannot get over every one of these dozens of walls, you have to acquit Karen Reed. The truth is, Karen Reed is not guilty. Not because of technicalities, but because the facts, the law, the science, the physics, the data, they all say so. They demand it. The Commonwealth does not have a theory about how John was hit by the car. They haven't even shown you that it's possible that he was hit by a car. And the reason they haven't is because it's not possible that he was hit by a car. There was no collision. Your job is not to do their job, their burden entirely. It's theirs. They have to prove this case and their theory beyond all reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And not only do they not have a theory, they can't prove one that doesn't exist. All you need to know is that the Commonwealth failed. They failed to provide you with a truthful representation. They failed to prove the essence of their case, that John was even hit by a car to begin with. They failed to prove any intent on the part of Karen Reed because she has none. They failed to investigate the actual suspects in this case. They failed to present the lead investigator to you. They failed to justify the perjured testimony that you heard discussed in this case. They failed to hold accountable an officer who came in here and lied to you and claimed false memories so she could do the right thing to cover for a fellow cop or cops. They failed to maintain a fair and unbiased and honest investigation. They failed to present you with the truth. And this is what you get. An investigation that's riddled with errors and omissions and a rush to judgment and conflicted and corrupted from the start. Every part of it. That is the literal definition of reasonable doubt. How can they ask you to be morally certain based on this evidence? It's a tragedy. When the government fails so completely, so catastrophically, when there are dozens and dozens of points of reasonable doubt on the table, your duty, your oath is clear. Your sworn obligation under the law is to acquit Karen Reed. Not just because you can, because you must. Justice demands it. Do not let the Commonwealth get away with this. Don't let them get away with this. Do not endorse and sanction an investigation that is broken and corrupted top to bottom. But just as importantly, do not let Michael Proctor get away with it.
Ooh.
And make no mistake about it, folks. If you convict Karen Reed of anything, science, the physics, the data, they lose. But tragically, Michael Proctor wins. Remember his texts. Something stinks. Yeah, but serious charges will be brought on the girl. She's fucked. Could you ever say to yourself, this is justice? The fact is there was no collision. A car did not kill John O'Keefe. So I ask you, let your voice be heard, not in whispers, but in truth. Let the community feel, through your verdict, that justice cannot be bent and that it will not be buried. Find Karen Reed not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Beautiful. I'm Lauren Cadillac. Thanks for joining me. Why didn't Brendan go first? Usually the state goes first. I'm very, very confused as why Hank didn't go first. Does anyone know? Happy Friday the 13th. Hi, Nene. Hey, CJ. Hi, Nettie. Hi, No Face. Good morning. Good morning. What is Hank the Skank gonna say?
John O'Keefe was 46 years old. 46 years old.
Why didn't he go first?
He spent his life helping people. He's described as a good man, kind, generous, thoughtful. He was a Boston police officer. He worked to help the community. Everything you've heard about this man, he was a good man. He helped people. When his niece and nephew had nobody, he took them in. He took them in. John O'Keefe seemed to be the type of person who would help anybody at any time. And on January 29th, 2022, John O'Keefe needed some help. He needed help from somebody else. You see, John O'Keefe had just been hit by Karen Reed in front of 34 Fairview Road, and he lay on the ground dying. And he needed help. Someone to reach out a hand, someone to knock on a door, someone to make a phone call to 911, even anonymously. Not take responsibility, just to help. And there was only one person in this entire planet who could help him that morning, to give him a chance. Maybe it was a 33% chance if he met the Isaac Wolf of the world. But to give him a chance. And that one person who could help him that morning was this defendant right here, Karen Reed. And she made a decision. In her
The
Lexus
homeowner's
with the
gonna
shattered
find out.
taillight, debris field all over the front yard, and
I'll
John
be
O'Keefe
right back.
lying helpless like a child on the front yard. She made a choice. She didn't call 911. She didn't run to his aid. She didn't knock on a door. She made a decision about herself. In her Lexus, she drove away. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. Before I go through and detail the evidence, let's talk a little bit about the evidence as a whole. She was drunk. She was drinking that night. She was drinking McCarthy's with John. She was drinking at the waterfall. Her blood was taken with samples of a retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. She was drunk. She hit him. The timeline in this case is beyond dispute. You can accuse, assault, characterize, malign, twist. The timeline doesn't change. It is data. Data is data. The black box, the forensics from the SD card, we know exactly step by step where they were. We know in that window she hits him because he never moves again. His healthcare data, the temperature on the battery of the cell phone, the physical evidence, the debris field, the DNA, the hair, and then she left him to die. He had a basal skull fracture. Count the coop, you heard all about it when the back of his head hits the ground and the brain comes forward. Dr. Wolf told us the reason why they have level 1 trauma centers around the country is because people can survive this injury if they get help. That's why they have this care. That's why they have these hospitals. But you gotta get help. You gotta get help. And if you don't, you develop symptoms, ecchymosis, raccoon eyes, your brain swells, and you die. She was drunk. And that night was a recipe for disaster. aspect. But before we get to the drinking, in some ways, the fate of this night was sealed well before that night, because John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were in a toxic relationship. This relationship was crumbling. We hear lovey-dovey, and it was crumbling, and we know it. And we know it because a month before, his niece Kaylee talks about when they went to Aruba. It should have been a wonderful event. It was discord. It was fighting. It was aggravation. When they got back, the discontent was palpable. Miss Reed reaches out to Brian Higgins, text messaging. John O'Keefe, the relationship is crumbling. And you heard a little bit about what that relationship was like. Kaylee, his niece, told you, when there was an argument, John would do what John does. He would walk away. She described to you one time, to get away from the scene, he walked into his bedroom. But the defendant wouldn't let it go, pounding on his door, having to get the last word, never letting go of the fight. Kind of mirrors what happens on January 29, 2022. And maybe outward appearance, they got along. Maybe sometimes quietly they got along. But behind closed doors, relationships have up and downs. We have a bird's eye view into the relationship on January 28, 2022, because we have the text messages. Not so lovey-dovey. The relationship is almost over. The tensions are simmering beneath the surface. They are not getting along. She believes Mr. Keefe is already halfway out of the relationship and he's not into it anymore. You will read them, you saw them. This relationship was unstable and at its end. And so fast forward that night. That night, after this discord, after the arguing, they go out and what do? They drink. And they drink a lot. So he drinks a lot, and Karen Reed drinks a lot. You've seen the McCarthy videos. You can call it 6, 7, 8, whatever you want to call it. You can see the shots into the mixed drinks. More shots into mixed drinks. Count them yourself. Over a half dozen mixed drinks in just a few hours. Sober? And then at the
They were heavy
waterfall,
drinkers.
a shot, a mixed drink. Now, it was brought up the waterfall that there was some type of discord between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. They knew each other. They were friends. Brian Higgins' conduct of speaking to Karen Reed is not honorable. It's not. But they were friendly. There was no adversarial relationship. There was no anger between them. What we heard is they barely greeted each other. Can we have slide 1, please? At the waterfall bar, when you see John O'Keefe come in, here's him barely greeting them. That's him, Mr. Higgins. Barely greeting each other. Reality sometimes is different than argument. This is a celebratory mood. Take that down, please. Celebratory mood. A bunch of friends. They're playing around. They're hugging. They're grappling. This is a fighting technique for a murder 2 hours later. Is that the story? They're practicing their moves to murder John O'Keefe. In this celebratory mood, you don't see any aggravation or animus between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. Inevitably, the next morning, Karen Reed is brought to the hospital and they take her blood. Now, the government doesn't have to prove that she was drunk. It is either that she's over the legal limit, 0.08, or she had enough alcohol to affect her ability to operate a motor vehicle safely, but you will know that she was far beyond the legal limit. After the retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. Almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit.
Hold on. Isn't he making a case for manslaughter? That's not murder.
Now, it's been intimated, not come out and said, that maybe she went home and started drinking after she got home. No evidence, mind you, no evidence. And that somehow that is why she had a high blood alcohol level. It's not appropriate for me to comment on the credibility of another attorney's argument, so I won't do that. But Karen Reed will do that for her. So if we listen to slide 2, she'll tell you exactly what she thinks about that one.
My alcohol intakes probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they report me at more parties, which is where I consume most of the alcohol, was the weakest at the time. It tasted just like old soda water with lime.
Slide 3, please.
I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway at 12. I mean, it was quiet. The roads were very quiet and still. And I was going, when I've had a few drinks in my driveway, it was where it's too slow. I go my alerts aren't sharp as they should be. But I should try to.
Do you think she drank when she got home? When they leave the Waterfall Bar at 12:12, you see a video, you have it in evidence, there's a still photo of John O'Keefe holding a glass. Not from the Albert's home. He didn't sneak into the house in the cupboards and grab a glass. From the waterfall, you see him with a glass, and in it is a straw. Take a look at that picture. And now from 12:12 on, we virtually have a historian in the data that tells us exactly where he went, exactly step by step where he went. And how do we have that? Well, we know the defendant's car had like a black box, and Judd Welcher, Dr. Judd Welcher, took the data from the black box and downloaded it so you can see the movements and the triggering events. And then Shannon Burgess, well, you don't like what he says, don't attack the data, attack the man. He can be mocked for his LinkedIn profile or his unupdated CV.
For lies?
Is he found a key, critical piece of this case that did not exist before. He found a recent one, and it was that SD card. The SD card that everybody missed, including the defense expert. Everybody missed it. So as much as you want to make fun of him, Shannon Welcher found the key so that we could have the time and date and location coordinated for an impenetrable timeline that can't be broken. That's what Shannon Burgess did. And so we know on the way from the waterfall to 34 Fairview, Ms. Reed is driving drunk. Mr. O'Keefe is in the passenger side of the car, and they're heading their way to 34 Fairview, and they get lost. And now we have more data because John O'Keefe has a cell phone. And I said it at the beginning, it is a historian. It doesn't suffer from bias, it doesn't suffer from prejudice, it doesn't suffer from memory loss. It has data on it. And he puts on Waze, high location data, as Ian With would say. And it tells you second by second the speed, the location, the movement. That's what it does. And he has healthcare data on that phone. The healthcare data separately shows his movement. And that is critical. It is critical because it not only shows his movement, it shows when he does not move. That healthcare data is critical. And it's not subject to bias. It's not in dispute. There's no other contrary evidence. It is data. On the way to 34 Fairview, alcohol fuels tension. We know that. And we know from those text messages the tension in that relationship. And then there's a trigger. There is a trigger on the way because they're lost. And when John O'Keefe calls Jen McCabe for directions, Jen McCabe says something that triggers what's going to happen next. Could I have slide 4, please?
What?
Very close to the Alberts. In fact, when Jen was navigating John to the Alberts when I was driving, she said it's near Ashley's house. Ashley and John hooked up prior to John and I dating.
And so as they travel to 34 Fairview under the duress of this crumbling relationship, fueled by intoxication, we have triggers. Now, we know on their way there, we know from the data, where they went, how they moved. If we look at slide 5, Ian Whiffen showed you a guide. You could enlarge that zero, please. And it shows you with the healthcare data, it registers as flights climb, but it doesn't mean someone's climbing upstairs. What it means is an elevation. And he breaks down the data, the red, the green, and you can move down to this building. And then the bottom left, that's 34 Fairview. You can see second by second the circles of their route, even the 3-point turn on Cedar Crest. That's what you see. At that point, they've left the bar. Remember, the battery temperature was 82 degrees. They're now in a car. It's now 77 degrees. Think about how accurate the battery temperature is, that it reflects the difference between being in a bar and being in a car. They take a 3-point turn at Cedar Crest. And because of Shannon Burgess and because of Judd Welcher, we have the data, and it's a triggering event. Remember, if there's an acceleration past 30%, it registers data on the car, and that's exactly what happens. It's a 3-point turn, and it all lines up with the cell phone after you synchronize the times. It's that simple. There's nothing complicated. There's nothing tricky. There's nothing
Raggy.
about it. It's data. They do the 3-point turn, and you can match the cell phone clock with the Lexus clock, and when you do, you can reconcile the difference.
So
There's
he
a lot of talk,
didn't
a lot of
climb
argument, a lot of
stairs.
fights. Shannon Burgess says 21 to 29 seconds. Mr. DeSorga comes in. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to actually do anything. He wasn't given the invitation to test the data. He just looked at the report and made criticisms like a Monday morning quarterback. But even he, looking at the data, says, well, it's 3 seconds off or 2 seconds. Same window, same time. We have all the arguments we want. They're there, they're together. The data matches up perfectly. Perfectly. And so they make their way down to 34 Fairview Road. They don't stop. They don't stop at the driveway. They don't stop. And John O'Keefe gets out of the car. They go to the flagpole. We know for 2 reasons. One, the data. And secondly, Mr. Nagel and Ms. Mason at Cedar Crest, at that intersection before it goes down to the right, they meet. They let Karen Reed go first. They fall behind in the truck. Now, at this point, Mr. O'Keefe has about 8 more minutes before the beginning of the end of his life. And he's in that car. He's in that car for most of it. Because Ms. Mason and Mr. Nagel don't see anybody get out of the truck. Nobody crosses the lawn. Nobody goes to a garage. Not just because they didn't see it. They didn't. Not because they didn't see it. Because the healthcare data on the phone shows that John O'Keefe is not moving. The car is stopped at the flagpole. The healthcare data stops. The battery stays at 77 degrees. The data is the data. You can't change it as much as you want to. It's data. And they sit at that flagpole for minutes. It's 12, 24, 33 when they get there. They're there past 12:30. Remember, Ms. Mason and Ms. Nagel said they're about 5 minutes and then they go. It's not exact, but about 5 minutes they said. So there's about 2 minutes left for John O'Keefe. And what are they doing in those 2 minutes? What are the last 2 minutes of his life that he can remember that would be open to him? They're arguing. They're arguing. They're arguing. And we know they're arguing because Miss Reed toils us through first responder Becker.
Becker?
She was sad. Remember, he sees her in the back of the ambulance and he's trying to calm her down. She was sad because her last moments were arguing. They're in an argument. That's why they're not going in the house. But John O'Keefe decides to get out of the car. We know because the dome light goes on. That's what happens when you open a door. Whether he's bent down, he's standing outside, or on the other side, the dome light is on. And then you see the data. John O'Keefe begins to move. 12:31:56. It's the first time he has moved since they got to the flagpole, and it will be the last time he moves in his life. And he moves to 20 seconds. goes and says that the satellites, they move, they reconnect, they pull information. He's no longer on high frequency data, his waves are shut off. Now it's more random, it's low frequency. We would never suggest, and Mr. Whiffen did not claim, based on location data alone at that point, you can tell exactly what John O'Keefe is. What he said is it was readings all night. The bullet is always near the flagpole. That doesn't mean he was always near the flagpole. He could have moved. He could have moved in the circles and come back. Location data is consistent with him never leaving the flagpole. But that in itself is not enough. But there's more. There is more. There is the healthcare data. There is the temperature of the cell phone battery. And so he moves for 20 seconds. It turns west. It does not say he walks to the house. That's not what the data says. It doesn't say that he goes straight line and he walks over to the door. In fact, could he even get to the door in 75 feet? Could he get there? Because when the investigator for the defense testified, he measures from the driveway. He never stopped at the driveway. He never measures from the flagpole. He never measures from the flagpole to the garage door. So this fantasy that somehow he walked in the garage, even though there's no evidence, there's no witness, there's no data. 20 seconds of his life, and he moves. And healthcare data registers his steps. It could be pacing, it could be a straight line, it could be shaking the phone. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know everything. We don't know every little detail and every little second. We don't have to. That's not doubt. That's not reasonable doubt. We know for that 20 seconds.
Y'all answer the poll.
And in that 20-second window, when he moves, he has his phone and he looks down, 12:32:09, he sees a text message from his friend, John McCabe. And he looks at the text message and he closes it.
I created a poll. You guys got to answer. I figured out how to do it. Respond to the poll, please. Answer this poll.
And then it happens.
I have more poll questions, so I need
We
this
know
one answered.
From the uncontroverted data from that black box, we know that Karen Lee, after he gets out of the car, drives away. She drives for at least 33 feet away from him. He's back near the flagpole. She's gone. It's over. Whatever argument is over. Whatever anger and flame has been dispassioned, she's moved on.
Then why would she call him?
He's separate from her. He's safe. And then she makes a decision. That's what this case is about. Then she makes a decision. She could have driven home. She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. But like knocking on the door, like Kaylee said, getting the last word, she doesn't drive away. She takes that 6,000-pound Lexus and she makes a decision. And the decision is that she steps on the gas after banging it into reverse. Before we talk about what happens next, I want to talk to you a little bit about the charges in this case. And I hate to digress, but it's important so we really understand what we're talking about here. I have no authority to talk about the law in this case. The Honorable Judge Cannoni will do that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the charges. Don't rely on my interpretation of the law. It's the judge who has that special power. But I want to explain to you a couple of things so when you think about what happens next, you can really assess the facts of this case with the charges against Ms. Reed. She is charged with second-degree murder. It sounds ominous, it is. It's a serious charge, second-degree murder. When most people think murder, they think shooting or stabbing somebody. It's natural to think that. Second-degree murder is different. It's not first-degree murder. I told you at the beginning of this case, I told you that we were not going to suggest or try to prove that Ms. Reed intended to kill John O'Keefe. That was never part of this case. We're not claiming that. I told you that we were not ever going to try to prove that she even intended to hit him. We never suggested we would try to prove that, and we're not trying to prove that she intended to hit him. We're not.
How do you get to second degree then?
What we are obligated to prove and what we have proven from the evidence in this case of second-degree murder is that she intended an act, and that is putting the car into reverse and heading back towards John O'Keefe. She intended that act. The question then becomes, did her conduct create a clear, plain, strong likelihood of death?
Oh, that's all you need?
Late at night, dark, beginning to snow, under the influence of alcohol, knowing where she stopped and left him after an argument, heading back in reverse to the exact spot or right near where she left him at over 24 miles per hour, accelerating at over 75%. You need to ask yourself, are you convinced if somebody does that create a plain and strong likelihood of death? And if there's no doubt in your mind that she intended to hit that accelerator in reverse, and that conduct will create a clear and plain likelihood of death, then she's guilty of that crime. Whatever the label is, she would be guilty of that crime. Now think about this. Let me give you an analogy. If somebody, maybe a teen or someone young, impulsive, is on a bridge, and they see cars going by, and they have a boulder, and they want to throw the boulder off, they're not looking to hurt anybody. They're not meaning to kill anybody, but they throw the boulder off the bridge because they want to see the car break, the thrill. And when they throw that boulder off the bridge, and it comes down and lands on the car, and there's somebody, passenger, child, anybody in that car, and it then goes through the roof and kills the person in the car, did they intend to kill that person? No, they were trying to have a thrill throwing the rock. Did they have the malice to want that person dead? No, they didn't. But that would be an example of second-degree murder. When you take a boulder and throw it off a bridge, there's a plain and strong likelihood of death. When Karen Reed, in the midst of that tension and fight, after she drove away and was gone, disengaged, when she came back for the last word, in the darkness, the beginning of the snow, under the influence of alcohol, and decided to stop her Lexus, decided to put it in reverse, decided to accelerate 75% in the exact same direction of where she left him, and then hit him, and he died. I suggest to you that is second-degree murder. The other charge, operating under the influence of alcohol.
Hold on. Besides tow mater, who goes 24 while reversing? I don't think I've ever gone above like 8 when I'm reversing. Just
Manslaughter. It's different. It's a totally different and separate charge. Was she under the influence of alcohol?
yes.
And then
Yeah.
secondly, did she operate her Lexus wantonly and recklessly in a way that would
Yes.
very likely result in serious injury? When you're under the influence of alcohol and you drive a 6,000-pound Lexus in the heat of the moment,
Mm-hmm.
at the direction of where somebody is, whether you intend to hit them or not, I submit to you that is wanton, it is reckless, and any reasonable person would think it's very likely that serious injury would result.
Honestly, I don't even think you have to drive towards someone's direction.
Killed. It's not a matter of intending to hit, it is the conduct of the operation, and the risk that is created. And so those two charges are 2 of the 3. The 3 is leaving the scene, knowingly causing death. And we'll get to that. So now, sadly, we need to get back to 34 Fairview Road where we left. We know from the tech stream data that she drove 33 feet at least, because it only picks up a 10-second window. And when it starts to pick up the data, we know she's driving at a speed. So it's more than 33 feet. We just don't know. And then when she comes back, she covers the 33 feet and 50 more. 80 feet. 80 feet. Over 80 feet. Now, nobody has ever suggested, even Dr. Welcher, when she collided with him. This data doesn't tell you collision. It's a 6,000-pound Lexus. It's a 216-pound man. It's not going to show a blip. It could have been in that 10-second window. It could have been 2 seconds after. It could have been 4 seconds after. But it's in that pocket of time, and we know it. We know it because when we reconcile the data with the phone, that 20 seconds is in the same window of that 10-second window coming back. So even a couple seconds later, 4 seconds later, whatever the sorter wants, he stops moving. John O'Keefe stops moving. Forever. Forever. That's slide 6, please. You'll get to see this more closely, and you can't probably see it where you're sitting, but there's important data. Data doesn't lie. And you will see acceleration, 75%. You will see speed, 24 miles per hour backwards. You will see distance, over 80 feet. That's what you're going to see in this data.
Well, I guess
on
if you're
that night.
drunk.
Anger, although not necessary in any of these charges, anger can be inferred for somebody to come back that hard, that fast, that reckless, that obvious, is likely to create a plain and strong likelihood of death. That data tells a story that can't be changed. They get tapped. Arca, they did some crash test dummies. You know what else they do? Texturing data. There's nothing about that data that is uncertain. Nothing. Take that down, please. When Ms. Reed hits John O'Keefe, collides with John O'Keefe. We don't know if he went in the air a foot. We don't know if it was how much of a clip it was. We don't know if he stumbled back. But we know there's a collision. There's no doubt there's a collision because her taillight's all over the yard. It's all over the yard. And when he falls back and he hits the back of his head, his basal fracture, he's then lying there helpless. When Miss Reed leaves, she leaves behind tons of her taillight all over the yard. All over the yard. It's called debris field. And you've seen videos. You can't replicate the exact contact. You can't because you need where the person was hit, how fast the person was going, but you know what happened because when you look at the debris field, when a light is broken, it's no different than what was on the front yard. It's no different. She leaves him behind. She leaves her taillight behind. She goes home. And on her way home, you know she's still angry. You know she's still angry because she starts leaving him voicemails. Slide 7, please.
I mean, usually when you've
Healthcare starts at
someone,
12:30.
you're not angry anymore.
12:32:04 to 12:32:12 is the data which is adjusted when you reconcile the clocks in the Lexus. 12:32:09 is when Mr. O'Keefe closes his phone after looking at Jen McCabe's text. 12:32:16 is his last steps. Because if the sorter says that red range should move a little bit 2 or 3 seconds, they can move it 4 seconds, 5 seconds. It doesn't matter. It's all in the same window. It doesn't change. You have slide 10, please. Play that, please.
But this is weird though. So they're saying she backed up that far to hit him.
Each one of those pegs represents.
That doesn't make sense.
You can't place that car where it was in front of there. You just can't. The data doesn't tell you that, but that tells you the movements of that car. Now, as John O'Keefe sadly lays on the ground, abandoned, you're going to have to ask yourself a question for charge number 3, leaving scene, knowing somebody was injured and then died. You're going to have to ask yourself, is there evidence that Miss Reed knew that she had hit him? Don't need to prove it for murder 2. Don't need to prove it for OUI manslaughter. But for the 3rd charge, Commonwealth has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt she knew she hit him.
Obviously, she didn't.
We weren't there, but there was an eyewitness. There was a guide. And that eyewitness tells us that
Who?
she knew. And that eyewitness is Karen Reed herself. She tells you that she knew. We have slide 8, please.
Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I could have been. It was howling wind. I had YouTube blasting on the stereo. And I thought, did he somehow try to flag me down, which was the reaction I was hoping to garner as I slowly pulled away from the house? Did he come up and maybe trip or bend over to pick up his cell phone and I ran over his foot and then he passed out drunk? I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him?
When she left Fairview and left John behind, she didn't think he was mortally wounded. She knew she hit him. She knew she hit him. And so when she made her way back home, not only did she leave debris field all over the front lawn, but she took evidence with her too. Hair, DNA on the taillight, and she drove back to John's house. And she started calling on the way back, 12:33, just a minute and a half later. And then her messages show her anger. You see, this was John's fault. This was John's fault. And her phone calls tell you about the tone and the destruction of that relationship. 53 phone calls that night. 53 phone calls. Not one to 911. Not one to Jen McCabe, please go outside and try to help. Not one to a hospital. Not one to anybody but him. 53 calls. Slide 12, please. Play voice no one, please. The calls keep coming. Cell phone temperature 72 degrees. He's been outside now, not moving, on that cold, hard ground with his cell phone under him. The warmth of his body, the cold ground, 72 degrees. It tells you the story. As this temperature plummets and that cell phone battery is compromised, so is John O'Keefe. And him and his cell phone alone on that yard. 66 degrees at 12:45. It is plummeting. Ian Whiffen's taking a phone and putting it in a freezer, not a same analogy. The idea that means that John O'Keefe was in the house, absurd. 66 turns to 61 at 12:53. 48 unanswered calls from the defendant. He's not in at a party. He's not wrestling with Brian Higgins. He's not in a fight. If he's in a fight, his cell phone would be moving. There would be healthcare data. There would be steps. If he got into the house in 20 seconds and his cell phone is found under his body the next day, and how would he get back outside? There would be more steps because his phone is working. The data is the data. There's nothing wrong with it. It's registering everything. The temperature, the movement. He doesn't go in any house. He can't go in any house. His phone never moves again. Voicemail number 3, please. Listen to this.
John, I'm dealing with a fucking kid. Nobody knows what the fuck you want me fucking murder.
Did you hear that? Nobody knows where you are. It is 12:59. John O'Keefe has been on that lawn for about 27 minutes. She hasn't called anybody else, hasn't spoken, has no information. Nobody's called her. You'll see her phone records. And she says, nobody knows where you are. She knows. She knows. Nobody does know where he is. Except her. Except her. Why is she asking nobody knows who you are? She is starting to to get panicked because she knows she hit him. Not suggesting she meant to kill him or for him to die, but she knows she hit him, and now he's not responding, and she's getting nervous, and she's getting anxious, and she's leaving call after call after call. He's not answering. He's not calling back. He's not even picking up the phone. And we know what's happening at this point. Panic, drunken denial, it's setting in. And so then we see the healthcare data from Miss Reed's phone. She doesn't move after a little after 1 o'clock. She could be sitting, she could have fallen asleep, but she doesn't move for a while. But she wakes up. She wakes up early the next morning. Take that down, please. And when she wakes up, she doesn't call Jen McCabe and say, "Where's John?" She doesn't call
Why would she do
Brian
that?
Higgins. She has his number, has been texting with him. "Hey, was John at a party with you? Did you see John tonight?" She knows exactly where she is, and she's frantic. So she wakes up Kaylee, that young girl from the time, and she says, she's panicked, she can't understand where she's saying, "Call Jen McCabe. Call Jen McCabe." Why is she calling Jen McCabe? She calls Jen McCabe. You know what she doesn't say when she calls Jen McCabe? "When did he leave the house? What happened last night?" No. She calls and says, "I left him at the waterfall. I left him at the waterfall." See, now it's gone from
What?
panic to self-preservation. "I left him at the waterfall." And Jen says, "Left him at the waterfall? I saw you in front of the house." But hangs up. Hangs up. So then she calls someone that she doesn't know very well. She calls Terry Roberts. But now she has to pivot because someone has seen her in the exact spot that John will be found soon. Whether she's the first one there or somebody else, John will be found. Maybe Lucky missed him. It's a snowstorm. You can't see. But someone's going to find him at some point. So she calls Carrie Roberts. It's no longer she left him at the waterfall. She pivots. She calls, "Carrie, John's dead. I think he got hit by a plow." Why do you think she chose those words?
That is
Why
interesting.
did she choose those words? Because she knew that there was a collision with a large motor vehicle, and she had to substitute her 6,000-pound Lexus for another big vehicle.
Or maybe she knew they were
By a plow.
plowing the
And
streets.
so now we have the introduction of Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts. Phone calls that they probably never, ever wanted. A worse nightmare to get a call like that. For what's going to happen, what they're going to see, what they'll never be able to forget. But because the defendant is John O'Keefe's girlfriend, they wake up in the middle of the night, in a blizzard, out of their kindness, their loyalty, their devotion to John O'Keefe. And when she calls them and tells them that she wants them to come out, this soccer mom was a perfectly normal life, gets drawn into this whole farce, and she answers that call. She gets out of bed. The spirit and kindness she displays to put herself in that position because someone asked for help, because that's what good people do. Kerry Roberts didn't know Jen McCabe. They both knew John. They met each other once years before. Kerry Roberts separately at that time answers the call, gets out of bed, drives to go help because they have a common denominator, a common bond. John O'Keefe. And so you hear and see at 5:07 the defendant leaves Meadows. She leaves. And Kaylee is behind waiting. And you see her back up, and Judd Welch just showed you all of those demonstrations where you could see the unsettled snow in the back, and after the bump you can see the pieces missing. No taillight. There's no taillight on the ground, all the white snow. There's no crack, there's no break. It's a nudge. It's a nudge. But the taillight has already been broken because when you look at the video, not one little piece, it's still framed, little angle with the light, the brakes are. You take a look, you'll be able to slow it down. You'll see the exact same piece is missing. Because it's back at Fairview. That's why it's missing. It's not there, it's back at Fairview. And then she leaves at 5:07. She she gets to Jen McCabe's about, 5:35, 28 minutes. It's about a 10-minute ride. Where did she go in 28 minutes? Where did she go? We don't know. We don't have data for that. But we know when she gets to Jen McCabe's house, she is panicked, frantic, out of her mind, screaming, waking everybody up. Jen McCabe comes down, can't understand her, going out to the car to try to console her. Why is she so frantic? Why can't she speak? Why can't she say a word? Because John went out and had a drink and fell asleep on a couch? Because John would maybe be cheating on her? What is causing this extraordinary duress? Did she stop somewhere on the way by? Did she just see death? Kerry Roberts comes, take charge kind of person. She pulls him behind, she sees the broken taillight in Jen McCabe's driveway, and she decides she's going to commandeer this. We're going to the back to Meadows, you're going to follow me, leave the car, I'll drive. At this point, Jen and Kerry don't know each other. They've only met once. And they go back to Meadows, they obviously don't find John because he's back at 34 Fairview. And then they start their way towards 34 Fairview. They start driving towards 34 Fairview, and they're looking, and you heard from Kerry Roberts, Jen McCabe, they're looking out the window, they can't see a thing. The snow, the blizzard, the weather, the darkness, they can't see anything. And they're driving, and they decide they're going back to 34 Fairview, and this is remarkable. This is remarkable. When they start their way past towards 34 Fairview, they get close. And when they get close, they can see nothing. But the defendant screams, "Stop, let me out." And they look around and they say, "What? Let me out, let me out." She does not see John O'Keefe. She knows where he is. She knows exactly where he is. She knows where to find him. She knows where to expect to find him because she knows where she left him. She tells us. Slide 13, please.
Driving Jen's in the passenger seat. And I've described this to everyone, so you probably heard this before, but John looked like a buffalo on the prairie. It was just a lawn and a heat that it wasn't a bush or a hydrant or a dog. It was a weird shaped lump at that time in those elements. And I was looking to find him on the side of the road. I was expecting I'd find him.
Why would she expect that? That is a very good question, Hank. Huh?
Weird
Hold
shaped
on.
lump in a blizzard, and you equate that to John O'Keefe.
Why were you
A weird
expecting
shaped lump, not like a bush.
to find him?
That is John O'Keefe.
But why were you expecting to find him on the side of the
She
road?
knows where she left John O'Keefe. And so they go over to Mr. O'Keefe, Terry, and Karen. And she's upset, there's no doubt. I am not for a second trying to deprive her of the unrest and the trauma that is happening at this scene. Doesn't change what happened before, but I appreciate the trauma. And they're trying to help him. And guess what happens when they first move him around 603, 604? Ian with him. Data. The cell phone battery gets the cool air, presses on the battery, the cell phone battery drops. Healthcare data, he has not moved since that 22nd. Hasn't moved. They start shaking him. You're going to see, when you look at the records, that healthcare data starts to move. He's been there all night. All night. Nobody else. Her. And so when they try to help him, she says something that is remarkable. She says, "There's a piece of glass stuck in his nose." She plucks it out. And she says when she plucks it out, blood spurts out. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes.
Oh, that means he's still alive.
Piece of glass, pulls it out, blood spurts out. That's what she says. As they try to help John, Jen is calling 911. They would like you to believe there's a conspiracy. That the glass that's found in Mr. O'Keefe's body is somehow from inside the Albert House hear in the clips, if we don't play it, you'll have all the clips with you. She talks about the fact that he took the bar. He took the glass. She says it. So the Albert House, they don't need to get glass. He already has the glass with the straw that's later found on the street, by the way. That's what happens on an impact. Things move. The glass comes with him, lands near his body. Debris field moves past him. Shoe, hat, straw. Jen McKay makes a call to her sister, and they say because it registers 29 seconds, a Cellbrite record is not the same as a call detail record. There's no evidence it was a conversation. No lights go on. There's no conspiracy. You can call somebody. It can ring. It can go to voicemail. They have no evidence, none, that there's a conversation between Jen McKay, the person who was ripped out of her sleep to come help, and her sister for some grand conspiracy. And so what happens next is traumatic. Kerry Roberts and Jen McKay see their best friend prone, lifeless, frozen, on the ground, and they're living this torment because somebody brought them into this. When they're trying to help John, there is not one suggestion from anybody that John ever went into that house. There's no reason to go into that house because John was never in the house. Not one time has anybody said, what time did he leave? I thought he went in there. Not even a whisper of it because it never, ever happened. When they find their friend John, he's not 20 feet off the side of the road like Mr. Rentschler or Mr. Wolf thinks. He's right there by the side of the road, close by the curb. We have slide 14, please. You can see there's Kerry Roberts' vehicle, and then on the left, you can see where they were. Right up. That is a stumble and a fall. Remember when Jonathan fell, there wasn't snow. It was just the beginning of the dusting, but with the cold, hard ground. Remember what Dr. Isaac Wolf told us about cold, hard ground? Causes this type of injury all the time. All the time. If we could go to slide 16, please. Remember the glass in the nose? The glass in the nose. See on the bottom left, that's where the Canton Police Department found the glass that he took from the car from the waterfall. And then exhibit 195, matching glass. On February 3rd, the matching piece of glass was found on the street. The matching piece of glass, the glass that was found with Mr. O'Keefe, was found on the street. He didn't fall back 8-10 feet from the road. It broke, and then it shattered and went to the street. I would suggest to you it broke at the time of the collision, and he carried the glass with him, leaving the evidence behind, a trail to memorialize what happened to him that night.
That is pretty
Straw,
good evidence.
take a look at that picture, and leaving the waterfall at 12:12, the glass straw in the drink on the street. Collision, glass, nose, straw, back, hits his head. Replay the clip on the left, please. 59.
I would have never let her do the show if I was her lawyer.
So when John got out of the car at Brian Albert's house, he took my full bottle of soda, which is sitting in the cup holder.
169, please.
So John's laying there, his left and his right, and I approach John from the left. That's where the street is. And he had a piece of glass, like perched on his nose, like just wedged like a splinter would be. And I just pulled it, and as soon as I pulled it, it just gushed blood down his face.
Thank you.
Okay.
911's called by Jen McKay. She's not hiding from anybody. She's trying to help. She's bringing attention to the situation. And when 911 comes, we have first responders. These people are heroes. Some of them, you've heard from some of them, they were born to help people. That's what their life is about. The detail on all their mechanics of getting to work 2 hours early in the middle of the blizzard so that you're there on time so you can help people. These are the core of our community. Mr. Nuttall, this is what he does. He rushes to go help. He's the first person on his knees. He doesn't know this person from anybody. But to him, it's another human being. This is his passion. Katie McLaughlin, first responder. This is not just a profession, it's her life. Yes, she knows Caitlin Albert. Do you think she went there that night at a party and set up a murder and came back?
No.
And so they tell you what happens at the scene. Some things hard to remember, some things people will never forget. When you're in a traumatic incident, sometimes it's something you'll never, ever forget. And Timothy Nuttall remembers speaking to the defendant. I hit him. Remember, he's on his knees. What happened? I hit him. I hit him. She is now coming to terms with the moment. Her fear is realized. She hit him. She clipped him. She didn't think he was mortally wounded. She panicked. She can't come to terms with it, so she has to bring people with her to face it. And now she's facing the reality of it.
I don't know.
And her emotion is overwhelming. I hit him. I hit him. She speaks to Miss McLaughlin. I hit him. Not did I hit him? Could I hit him? Perhaps I hit him. That was earlier. Now she's recognizing what she did. I hit him. And these people are making it up. Anybody that says anything adverse or inconsistent or inconvenient is a liar or a perjurer or in on a conspiracy. Or is it that these good people who went there for a total stranger to do their duty to help happen to remember that she admitted what she had done? I know that doesn't reconcile with the boogeyman Proctor and the bad government. I know it doesn't reconcile with no DNA on this piece or that piece. I know it doesn't reconcile with everybody setting up the girl. I know that doesn't reconcile. But the reality is you have independent, core people who hear her say, I hit him. I hit him. And the attempt is to betray everybody. That's a lie. But you don't have to rely just on these good people, although you should. You should. You don't have to, because we have a guide, and it's Karen Reed. Slide 17.
I don't know. All that SD data came from the lying non-expert expert.
Did I, I've always said I did it, but did I really say this many times as law enforcement's claiming I said it?
Thank you. I know it doesn't fit the theme, the theory, the story, but she tells you herself. She endorses those good people exactly what they had heard. She tells you herself. She hit them. It's undeniable, it's unmistakable, it's inconvenient. But the truth has a way of seeping up to the daylight. It can be oppressed and suppressed and pushed down and covered and twisted, but it rises. It rises. And it is not a coincidence. There's no coincidence that Mr. Nuttall and Miss McLaughlin hear exactly that. She tells you. And Jen McCabe, when she's sitting next to or standing next to Miss McLaughlin, she tells you that she saw or heard the same thing. Remember what happened to her in the stand when she had the audacity to say, I heard her say it? What happened to her? This woman who never even wanted to leave her home that day, pulled out into a storm to see her best friend dead. What happened when she had the audacity to say that? And now we know that the defendant herself said the same thing. And the funny thing, the ironic thing is, you will see in a photo when Miss McLaughlin, firefighter, was speaking to the defendant, Miss McCabe was next to her. Miss McCabe was trying to protect her, trying to shut her up. Don't talk, you're upset, stop saying crazy things. The villain of the story was trying to help the defendant from incriminating herself. The irony. Can we have slide 9, please?
Not the irony. Oh, the irony.
That we have a chance to look at it. So it wasn't so tragic, it is interesting. It is interesting if you like data. It's 29, 12, 13. You know, leaving the waterfall, 82 degrees, 12:22. In the car, 77 degrees, 12:37. About 3.5 minutes after the defendant collides with John O'Keefe, it's starting to go down to 72. 12:45, see it drop and steady off at 12 or 1:36. Remember, cell phone battery under him. John O'Keefe, he was struggling for life. Goes fast. And blood still warm either way under him. Doesn't move again until 6:06. It drops down 7 degrees because the women are pulling on him. The cold air is hitting the battery. What happens at 6:15? You're going to see the video. You've seen it. Still photos. Kerry Roberts goes over, takes up the phone. Not only does she pick up the phone, she puts it in her pocket, and then 20 minutes
Doesn't this show that? Doesn't that show that it was getting cold at like 1 a.m.?
and then the phone is passed, put in a warm environment, and it raises up. 6:15. How can someone conspire to pick up a phone on the side of the yard that's under Mr. O'Keefe's body at 6:15 and know the battery temperature was then going to rise? And not only did the battery temperature rise, when you look at the healthcare data, at 6:15 when she picks up the phone, you know what happens to the healthcare data, right? It starts to move. It's data. It's data. So, while they're going through this duress, the defendant asked Jen McCabe for yet another favor. Look up hypothermia. Find out how long it takes for someone to die in a cold. And there's Miss McCabe in her winter jacket, soccer mom, trying to help. She has MS. Her hands aren't working. She's trying to type in what's happening during that time. It's a frantic scene. She tells you that. The defendant then wants to run back to the ambulance, so she goes with her, never finishes or completes the input. And then she tries it again. At 6:23, at 6:24. That's what this woman did that night, that morning. Not only for her friend, for her. For her. That's what she did. And what happens to her after? Because the timestamp, when you open the timestamp, it's at the time it's open, and she's in bed at 2:27 looking up Hockomock Sports because she is so interested in the kids' sports, and that timestamp stays open. And she goes to that tab the next morning when she puts in how long to die in cold. And that's being portrayed that she's in a conspiracy. She gets vilified as a murderer, a soccer mom who came to help. It took Ian Whiffen 5 minutes to show you a live demonstration on how simple that works. That she's not deleting anything. Jessica Hyde told you it's automatic deletions over time. You usually can't delete that information. That's not a click and swipe like the good Dr. Wolf from Arca knows how to do. This can't be erased. But they still hold on to this. As they argue to you and all the injustices that have been done, they tell you, they want you to believe, or take a flyer on the fact that she looked up how long to die in the cold at 2:27. It is the absolute contrary to the science. There's no basis to support it, but they stand here in front of you. Why? Because every time they say something like that, you look the other way. Don't look at her. Look the other way. 2:27. Look the other way. Don't look at what she did. Former Trooper Proctor. Look the other way. Don't look at her. Every time they make those oh, she got the glass from inside the Albert. Maybe in the basement. Look the other way. Don't look the other way. Look at the facts. Look at the data. And it all leads to one person. There's no grand conspiracy. It leads to one person, the defendant. And it's not just the data and facts.
Dater.
It's her herself. Let's talk about Mr. Proctor. You were invoked with this emotion early in the opening that this is a cancer. That's a tough word. Try to evoke that primal reaction, disgust. I'm not saying you shouldn't be disgusted by the text messages. You should. You should. They're not defensible. I don't stand here and defend impropriety. I don't. But that doesn't change the physical evidence, the scientific evidence, and the data. He was terminated. He paid a penalty. He was held responsible for what he did. He should have been. He should have been. But that doesn't give a free pass. That doesn't change the facts. It doesn't change the physical evidence. It doesn't change the science. It's unfortunate. It's distasteful. It's dishonorable. Remember, Trooper Lieutenant was asked was the investigation with honor and integrity? And he said it was. Was Trooper Proctor's effort honor and integrity? And he said it was integrity. But he never said honor. That's a man of honor. Military service, dedicated to his country, highest level of clearances to the President of the United States, now a state trooper. He would not say that Trooper Proctor was honorable.
Good.
Because he wasn't.
No.
He wasn't. But that does not, it doesn't create a conspiracy, doesn't invent a dog, it doesn't make somebody in a house something they're not. It just doesn't. When you read those text messages, they're hard to look at. It's unfair. It's unfair. And if there's a penalty more than being fired, well, maybe that penalty would be deserved. But it has nothing to do with the justice in this case. It just doesn't. There's not one piece of evidence, not one, that we can look at and say, this was tampered with. This was planted. This was distorted.
No, not one.
Remember when we introduced the taillights at the beginning? I didn't introduce three of the taillights.
Not the taillights.
Thanks, Steve, so I put them in. Those were taillights
Really?
that were only found by Trooper Proctor. I did not put that evidence in. Understanding those text messages and appreciating the disdain one might have for his comments. Not that there was any evidence of tampering, not that there was any evidence that it was not true, but I didn't put that evidence before you because we didn't need Trooper Proctor in this case. We don't need Trooper Proctor to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why I didn't introduce that evidence to you.
Not because he's dishonorable.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about planting of taillight. We know the taillight wasn't planted because Trooper Buchanan and Mr. Proctor did not go down to Dighton to see Miss Reed until later in the afternoon. We know from the 507 video, we've seen that. We know the taillight was already missing when she's leaving the driveway. When the good Canton police detectives went to do a wellness check to care for those young children, and they went to the house, inadvertently, they didn't even know it, the dash cam captured the back of the car. The taillight packed with snow is missing. It's already gone. It can't be planted. At this point, Trooper Proctor's still in his pajamas. He's not even on the case. He's not even on the scene. He's been near the car. And in the Dighton videos themselves, when you take it at an angle and it moves, but if you get the right angle, you can see it's missing. It's gone. Can we have slide 18, please?
It is missing.
It's gone. And the same thing when you do the videos, it's a different angle, it's smaller.
But I don't think it's that big.
Let's go up and down and slow it down, you will see it expands. It's gone. So when you have Dighton Officer Barrows come in here and try to tell you what he saw in the salad bar, couldn't have been it. You gotta ask yourself, what interest does he have coming in here in this case? A lot of attention on this case, a lot of people watching. Comes in after, of course, driving all the way out to the defense attorney's hotel to meet in the conference room so he can get a subpoena. He spends 2 hours driving up and back so that he can conveniently get a subpoena that tells him to appear, which he could have got by fax or in the mail. And so when he comes in, what he says is, that's absolutely not what I saw. Absolutely not. And then he claims at the last time he testified, he had made the same statement. I showed him his transcript. And did you see the redness creep over his face? He never said this before.
Not like the other guy.
And so he sits on the stand with a new story after a meeting. We don't know why. But then I show him that bottom right photo with the snow, with it missing. And I say, is this the way it looked? It's of course before the snow melts out the salad board so that you can see it on his photos. And he says, yes, he had to agree. This taillight was gone. There's no boogeyman. There's no plant. There's no Higgins at the salad board. There's no one tearing out pieces. In fact, remember I played you a clip and you'll have it where the defendant says, I was picking out pieces, it was crashed in, the bulb was showing, and I was showing Kerry and Jen when they went back to Meadows. If you don't remember, listen to that clip, you'll hear it. Unfortunately, there's no ring video when they go back to Meadows. video when she leaves. There's no ring video when she gets back. And so now when we're trying to look the other way, we want to find a dog bite. So enter Dr. Russell. Dr. Russell, according to her, nice woman, nice doctor, very accomplished. I respect that. She's the only dog expert in the world. The thing is, we know no idea what that expertise means. She volunteers for the job. She wants to be here, profile, but she can't explain the methodology. What are you looking for in a dog bite? She can't tell us. It starts a year ago.
Teeth?
It's claws, it's teeth, and then it's claws, then it's teeth, then it's I don't know. And then when you look at each of the different parts of the abrasions, she says, well, I can't tell if I look at each one of them, but all together it's a dog bite. It's a dog attack. That is the masterful expertise that the defense has bragged about bringing in.
Oh, get out of here.
Because she says this is a dog bite. She has never been in a forensic situation where she's looked at a wound and identified it as a dog bite before. This is the first time, the only time she's ever done it. And what she says is these are not punctures. Punctures means that it goes into the skin, a wound. There's no punctures. And she's sure because she's an expert, so you should rely on her because she's coming in saying she's an expert and she's being presented. Yet, after saying there's no punctures, Dr. Laposada comes in and she sees punctures everywhere. It's an animal attack. It's a dog. Oh, is it? No method, no methodology. No
Okay, Hank.
prior testimony that we know of other than arbitrarily what she says. And she says the exact opposite of Dr. Russell. Why is that? How does that happen?
Because Dr. Russell's
So obviously
wrong.
there is no science to looking at an abrasion and saying where it came from. They give us no detail. They give us nothing that we should rely on. They contradict each other. It's just sticks to look the other way. And so we have now the issue of the defense has said over and over again, there's no collision. There's no collision. There's no collision. And they had a number of witnesses come in to try to say that. And they point to Dr. Bello, who works at the medical examiner's office. She tells you that she doesn't see injuries consistent with a collision. She's looking at this case for 90 days. 90 days. The evidence in this case did not stop. It continued for 2 years. She knows nothing about the data, nothing about the black box, nothing about the interviews of Miss Reed. She doesn't know about the DNA. She doesn't know about the shards in the arm or in the clothes. Just write that in the clothes. She knows nothing about that. So in 90 days, she didn't see any lower body injuries. She didn't see any lower extremity injuries, which are very common in car collisions. That doesn't mean it didn't happen because she, in 90 days, saw a fraction of the information. A fraction. And we know now, argument back and forth for days about lower body injuries, the suggestion is a car accident can affect everybody differently depending on the angle, the scope, the speed. Some people can get plowed over by a car and have no injuries. Some people can get touched lightly and have more injuries. And there was the debate about no lower body injuries. Well, ARCA dispelled that in their dummy test that you can have a collision with no lower body injuries. They did that for us. Thank you. And so the idea that at the time in 90 days that she doesn't have enough information to say consistent with a car accident doesn't mean there's no car accident.
What about your own expert, Hank?
Let me talk a little bit about ARCA. I don't want to waste too much time with them. What expert who's supposed to come to you, they're not the arbiter of truth. Their opinions weigh no more than yours. Your common sense has more value than an expert's opinion. Their job is to assist you, to explain what their expertise is so that it's a tool for you so that you can make a decision. That's objectivity. We've heard words like confirmation bias, objectivity. Mr. Wolf got on the stand, and before we even started, you have to ask yourself, what expert has a court order messages and release the text messages? What expert, what objective expert uses signal, an encrypted app, to communicate about the case? Never used it before, hasn't used it since. And so when he did his tests, he used a lower weight arm. Wasn't trying to bash him, wasn't trying to insult him, tried to get him just to recognize that a 9.38 pound arm is less weight than John O'Keefe's metric, which would be 11.8. That's all, and because it's a lighter arm, it takes more speed to create the same damage. I don't know science, I don't know math very well, but that's basic. It's basic. And he fought me over and over again. Did he seem objective that he was trying to help you? Because Dr. Renshaw came in the next day and said, well, you have to adjust for that. That's all I asked him for an hour, about adjusting, just like Judge Welcher adjusted.
That's not true.
He adjusted.
That's not how he
Kind of
asked.
talked to me like
That's not what he
I
did.
was making something up. His own colleague had to admit it. Now, it's funny, he admitted it before he got through his credentials. No sequestration order violations. Nobody was coaching him, but he knew enough to come in at the beginning and get right on that point. And speaking of sequestration, remember Dr. Russell on her limo ride over? If Brendan asked you
Limo
a
ride.
question, make sure you ask him.
Didn't Pete Hegseth use single?
Slow down with the question. It's fair. Sequestration order is served as fundamental fairness for all witnesses, not just some. And so what happens with Dr. Renshaw, we don't know, but we do know he comes in here and he tells you that he was not getting information that was helping him the last time he testified. He insisted. I asked him 5 times, was he getting information that would help him in his testimony? Not from the defense, from his former employer. He said no, no, no. And at the end of the examination, he reads his transcript and it's yes, yes, yes. And he tells us that he's independent and objective. I asked him about a luncheon, not a big deal, just asking him about it. And he says, I have a sandwich and I stand in the corner until I remind him that we got video footage from the documentarian and he's in one of the scenes. And then things change. So when you talk about objectivity and the trust, they can come in and say, Judge Welcher said this and that. It doesn't make it so. Judge Welcher, Dr. Welcher, never in any report, in any presentation, in any testimony to you, ever suggested this is how it happened. This was how his arm was. This is how his feet was. He was trying to show whether or not the orientation. Could this happen with the angle, with the height? That's all that test was. It was no more. But what they do is they reposture it, repackage it, and say it means this when it doesn't, and we're going to show you why it's not that, therefore we win.
I don't think that's what
all
they
that
did.
is. It's semantics. Judge Welcher, Dr. Welcher, never suggested that. In his work on texturing data, monosyllable. And so what we have, inevitably, is we have a timeline that never moves, data that never changes, physical evidence that can't be put in that spot without a collision. We have, inevitably, proof, without any doubt, that on January 29, 2022, Ms. Reed was with Mr. O'Keefe and she got drunk. She drank. She was 2 to 3 times over the legal limit. And they went to a party, an after party, and they were fighting. There was a relationship in decline, and he got out of the car, and he had a brief window of life left. And when he got out, and she drove away, she couldn't let it go. She got drunk, she hit him, she left him to die. It's that simple. We don't know exactly how this collision happened, but we have a good idea from the physical evidence, and we know that it happened. Can someone have a collision without lower body injuries? Can I have slide 19, please? You bet they can. We don't know if this is the body position. We don't know if this is the exact speed, but what it tells us, this is viable. Look at the debris field.
Look how twisted that angle is. Look how twisted his ankles are, bro.
O'Keefe then falls back, hits his head,
That foot got run over.
left to die.
Look at this twisted ass angle. It's like going the wrong way. Nah, bro. That's injuries. That's hella injuries. I don't know, Hank.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt what happened that night. There is no doubt who did it. You have a very difficult task ahead of you. Consider the evidence, consider the law. Very difficult. There are 3 charges. There is second-degree murder. Ms. Reed, when she chose to drive back at Mr. O'Keefe in that night with a 6,000-pound Lexus, in that anger, 75%, Whether she meant to hit him or not, didn't mean to kill him, she hit him. Strengths, it is a plain and strong likelihood of death. You would never get back down your driveway if your kids were at the end of the driveway. You'd say, well, you're gonna kill somebody? You would never do it because you would expect, if you drove at them at that speed, that someone would die. That's second-degree murder. OUI manslaughter, she's drunk, she was reckless. She doesn't even know she hit him. She doesn't even have to know she hit him. But she did. She did. And she left a man who was kind and generous and thoughtful. She left him alone. She left him alone to die. Could I have slide 22, please?
Does the defense get to rebut this?
He is not an it. John O'Keefe is not a body. John O'Keefe is not a buffalo on a prairie. John O'Keefe is a person. And he was murdered by Karen Reed.
I don't know, guys. That was really bad.
All right, jurors, the next up is my instructions to
Instructions.
you
It
on
could be
the
bull.
law. I'm not gonna do that right now, you've been sitting.
So boring.
So I do have to tell you, even though you've just heard the closing argument, you cannot discuss this case even with each other, all right?
Okay, so now they're gonna go to lunch. And when they get back, the judge will give them their instructions. Wow, Massachusetts is weird, weird, weird. I'm tired from that, honestly, Hank. Wow. Yeah, no. I don't think there's beyond a reasonable doubt on any of these, because I don't think there's proof positive that there was even an accident. So,
Lopez.
yeah. So that's... Alright, so the judge will give her instructions when they get back from lunch, which means they're probably only going to deliberate for like a little while today, which means it's most likely they'll come back Monday. Because let's say it's 12:35 there. Let's say they eat 1:35. The instruction's probably going to take an hour. You're looking at 2:30. I highly doubt they're going to be able to review all of the evidence and have their discussions and all that in 2.5 hours. But if they do, I'll be around this evening. All right, let's talk Diddy. So apparently, Kanye came today after the witness testified yesterday that she had hooked up with another rapper and his girlfriend, and they had a freak off like event. And everyone was thinking it was, that it was Kanye. So that's very interesting, right? I think they got done with victim number 3? 2? I don't know. We don't know who she is. We're not going to speculate. It's a gag order. We're not going to break that. Just know that this person, lots of messages came out. She loved him, all that. I can write, as someone who suffered through child abuse, through her childhood, I can tell you that you will say things like, I love you, and that your abuser's your hero. Like, that's the cycle of abuse. But then yesterday, she's like, oh yeah, we went to Vegas, and one of the adult film stars that was there, and yeah, so... Oh wow, No Face says he came yesterday and they didn't let him in. Good, because I feel like he is definitely he is definitely a distraction for the jury. So I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see they didn't let him in. Okay, so my understanding is that the state will be resting by Wednesday of next week or Friday of next week at the latest. So I guess they have a They have a couple more witnesses. It looks like they have someone on right now. One of the HSI agents. He's talking about the building and the raid. So this is today. So yes, the victim, she victim 3? Yeah, because Mia was 2. Victim 3 is off and gone. And we knew she's supposed to be done by the end of Thursday, so they nailed it. They got that. All right, so now they have the HSI agent talking about, I guess, finding guns or something. Is he already on cross? So finding guns is important because it does show to me a little bit with the RICO. Okay, so let's go to we'll go to Law and Crimes coverage this morning. Okay, here comes Ye, wearing all white, greeting people. My son loves the music of Kanye, or has in the past. I don't know if he still does, but definitely not the politics. Okay, so there's testimony going on as Kanye walks in the building, and they're talking about, the guns. Okay, now there's a guy named Jonathan Perez who was going to invoke the 5th. They give him immunity. Let's see. So baby, okay, so he still has Lamont on. Okay, now Perez is the government's witness. Kanye leaves. It is boring, so I don't blame him. Okay. Okay, now they're back on. Oh, they're talking about where they found the lube and Astroglide. Weird. Ugh. Okay, so now Perez. He was a personal assistant from 21 to 24. KK had reached out for him to him, I guess. Interestingly enough, the government is not going to call KK. So I find that to be a really interesting turn of events. My understanding is they don't plan on calling her. Why did we just go back? KK told me to go to Miami. What's going on? Okay. What was your work? So he's the assistant. What the hell? It goes back twice. Okay. Would you make purchases at sex stores? Yes. Ew, he was clean. Ew, he had to do cleanup. Okay, so the press guy is now confirming Jane. And that they did the cleanup and they did the pre-trial. They had to do red lights. Okay. Interesting and awful at the same time. Okay, so there is apparently an issue with juror number 6, who my understanding is a black woman. Now, if you remember, when I went, there was a older black woman and there was a younger black woman. So the older black woman was the one who basically quit taking notes when Capricorn Clark talked about having gone back to work for Diddy. I'm not sure if that's the juror they have an issue with. And my understanding is that issue is supposed to be concluded by Monday. I don't know. The government said she lacked candor with the court, so I don't know if she lied on her jury intake or what happened there. The Diddy stuff has been just so intense. Like, it's just so much coming at us. It's making my brain ache. I've been so tired and having, like, I took a nap on Wednesday in the middle of the day. And I realized this because I have this shit going on, like, constantly. And it's, like, really messing with my brain. It is just past the 1 year anniversary of Brian Steele getting arrested in the YSL Young Thug trial, which is where most of us met. So I really appreciate you guys for hanging out for an entire year after that. Nay, No Face, Nettie, CG, Tavonda, Hippie Issa, who's not here today, Tall Glass isn't here today. Y'all are the real ones, the OGs. You've been here since the beginning, coming every Friday. You know, we were covering YSL. You were there before the Brian Steele. You were there for it, and you've been here after, and I cannot thank you enough. You guys are the bomb. All right. I will do jury, like a verdict watch, and when we believe there is a verdict for Reed, I will hop on. I don't think that'll be this afternoon. I honestly believe it'll be Monday or Tuesday. Now, Monday afternoon, I have a hearing that I got to go fight my little booty off for. So if it's during that, I won't be here, but I'll hop on after. And then, you know, maybe it'll be Tuesday morning, nice and convenient. Don't have anything but drafting going on that morning. Did you hear that, everybody? Okay, so Diddy's trial, prosecution's supposed to rest next week, which means that the defense then goes. And as I understand it, Diddy is planning on testifying. They also are going to have, I think the whole trial will be wrapped up and we'll have a verdict before the 4th of July weekend. So that's exciting. But yeah, my understanding is Sean Combs is going to testify in his own defense. And now, if you've been with me for very long, you know every human being that testifies in their own defense ends up guilty. Everyone we've watched together, when you insist on testifying in your own defense, you look like an asshole, you get caught on cross, and you're guilty. So it will be interesting. Maybe if I'm just like drafting and stuff, we can watch that part live together. That would be interesting. I mean, it's going to be interesting. And you could pretty much guarantee that he suffers from narcissism. Well, I don't know if it makes him suffer, but it certainly makes the people around him. Because every single time a defendant wants to testify for themselves, you know they're a fucking narcissist because they think they're smarter than the judge, the jury, and the lawyers. They think they're going to come sweet talk their way out of it. Absolutely not. Now, it worked for Diddy back in the 2000s, the early 2000s. It did. It did work for him. But I think he paid off jurors or paid off witnesses or something. It ain't going to work this time, y'all. We are past hashtag Me Too 2017. This shit ain't going to fly. No. The jury is going to see that narcissism on display. And then they're going to be like, oh, you really did it. I know Brian Steele and all of his lawyers are just like, God. But he's wealthy, and he's going to do what he's going to do. And I'm sure they've written him several memos. Each one sent him a memo about why he shouldn't testify. And each one has made him sign off on that memo. So he probably has like 6 different memos. But he's doing it anyhow. Because he's that smart. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting testimony. Also, if you remember last week, he complained that the court artist was making him look like a koala. And this week, let me try to find the picture. She made him look like a total fatty. I said, I personally, I will take koala over fatty. He's going to be pissed. Here, hold on. Hold on. Here we go. Look. Look. He doesn't look like a koala anymore, but he looks like a hunk of chunk. Where did the other one go? Hold on. The right here, guys. Right. Oh, look at that thumbnail. Look at that thumbnail. I would tell her, please make me look like a koala again. I'll take koala over this. Look how drab he looks. Oh, and there's testimony that he's a cuck, which is obvious because he liked watching men with this woman. So, like, duh. I don't really know why we needed that testimony. I think that's like anyone on the planet Earth over 30, maybe even over 20, is aware. Like, duh. So there's this whole thing about how she researched that he was a cuck, but, like, duh. I don't know, man. That trial is wishy-washy. The real issue is that we are receiving our information through hearsay, right? Like, there's no live camera, so we're not able to hear and absorb the information on our own. We have to have people hear and listen and then turn around and report back to us. And that is hearsay. That is why we don't allow hearsay in court, right? Like, you lose something there. So it's going to be really hard on Diddy to figure out where anyone's going on anything. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me this whole time. I appreciate it. I don't know if you noticed Ace of Heart earrings. For Mother's Day, my children got me an Ace of Heart charm. And I wore a heart that my son made for me when he was very young. So, and these are hearts too. All hearted out today. Thank you for hanging in here the whole time. I appreciate it. Just FYI, another note. Between July and August, I'm going to be in South America. So I'll be doing some of my lives from there. I will continue to live stream on Fridays. And again, be on the lookout for the Karen Reed Verdict Watch, which should take place Monday or Tuesday, but could possibly be this afternoon. Who knows? Who knows? Thank you, everyone. I will see you next time.